Hello and welcome to the channel. In this video, you're going to have the opportunity to watch us go through the process of artificially inseminating a small group of ewes in our flock with the intention of increasing the genetic diversity of our flock. My name is Jennifer Johnson. My husband and I raise a lovely flock of Shetland sheep, and we're raising them for their wool. So on this channel, it's all about what it's like living on a farm raising sheep for their wool. So on our farm, we are breeders, so we'll breed every year in the fall, and we breed in the fall because that is when our sheep go into heat. It's also called estrus, so that's when they are able to receive sperm and get fertilized and have lambs. The reason we breed is because we want to produce sheep that have really fine crimpy fleeces that hand spinners can enjoy. So that's really what we're about. And obviously, of course, we're trying to raise sheep that are healthy and are very well conformed. But for us, it's really about the wool and making sure that it's the best quality for our hand spinners. The way our breeding system normally works is we'll take rams from our flock and we'll select them very carefully and put them with a group of ewes that we've also selected very carefully to ensure that we have a high probability of getting the traits we're looking for any particular year, whether it be color, staple length, crimp type, body structure. There's always going to be different goals depending on what our flock looks like from time to time. And we sell sheep from the flock if they don't fit the profile that we're looking for. So they're definitely, good quality Shetland sheep, but they're not part of the program that we're working on about getting those great fleeces for hand spinners. So anyway, so we select the ewes and the rams. We put them together in separate pens. Many of those pens are outside. We can create 1 or 2 pens inside, but it's kind of hard. We don't have a lot of barn space. So the majority of the time, those groups, there are 1 ram and usually 8 ewes. We call that a breeding group, and they're in a separate pen. That way we know exactly who is the sire for the lambs that those ewes produce. So the rams will breed those ewes, and you can, usually it's a lot about hormones, obviously, and the ram can actually smell when the ewe is in estrus, when her estrogen levels are elevated so that she can become pregnant. And the ewe, when she is in estrus, will stand very still, not walk away from the ram, and allow him to impregnate her. This year, we decided to use rams from the UK. So there are a lot of breeders over in the UK that are raising Shetlands for very fine, crimpy wool. And so there was an opportunity that was presented to us by a group of very similarly minded breeders here in the States that also are looking for fresh genetics to bring into our flocks so that we can continue the goal of just generating those beautiful, fine, crimpy fleeces. The process to use rams outside of the U.S. is complicated by a regulation that is part of the U.S. law that we cannot import livestock into the U.S. And the reason for that is that they want to prevent the spread of particular diseases. So they don't, you just can't. It's illegal. You're not allowed to import live animals. So what you do is you import straws that are filled with sperm for that animal, in this case, rams. So the way it worked was reproductive specialists, veterinarians in the UK worked with these farms that were able to collect the sperm, freeze it, package it, ship it to the US so that then we could have it shipped to our veterinarian, who will then help us to put that sperm into our ewes. So it's a complicated procedure, but that's the way you do it if you want to increase your genetic diversity. So why did we want to do AI this year instead of, let's call it natural, where the ram mounts the ewe and impregnates her? So the reason we wanted to do it is because we wanted to increase that genetic pool. So right now we have ewes that are not related to the rams, but we would like to increase that. We'd like to open up our options. So because you don't put a ram and a ewe together that are siblings, that are mother, son, or whatever. You don't put that close relationship together in a breeding group. So it's important to get, unrelated sheep into your flock so that you can have that diversity. And diversity is mostly an issue as it relates to the health of the animal, the health and the well-being. As you narrow the genetic pool, certain undesirable traits that are unhealthy for the animal will tend to pop out. So you want to keep it nice and diverse. The struggle we have is that the original sheep that were imported here into the U.S. before the borders closed and regulations said you can't bring animals in anymore, that original importation of 30 sheep is pretty much the genetic composition of all the Shetlands in North America. And there have been some importation of straws into the U.S. since then, but for the most part, that's the genetic pool that we're working with, which is fairly narrow. And the other issue with it is that pool of animals that came over from the Shetland Islands looked like Shetlands, but they had recessive traits that were traits that are more similar to other breeds that they were crossing with on the Shetland Islands. It's a whole other topic, but sometimes in the U.S. you see those traits popping out. So stuff like very coarse fleeces, and I get this a lot with people, like, why is some Shetland so coarse and yours is so soft and springy? And it's because our stuff is pure Shetland. We're really working to get to that Shetland that was described in documentation from the UK archives as the Shetlands being the finest of all the British breeds of sheep. You look at some of the Shetlands here in North America, they're not fine, right? And that's just, they're still legitimate Shetlands here in North America based on the standard, but they're not that really fine crimpy Shetland that we're striving for. So because we've got this very narrow goal that's narrowing our pool, so there's a lot of Shetlands in North America that we can't really introduce into our program because they would be a step backward from our goals and what's important to us. So I've already explained this. The reason I can't bring a ram in from the UK and use him, which I would love to do, is that there's a regulation that says you can't bring animals in. And the reason is there's a disease, it's called scrapie. It's a degenerative fatal disease that sheep get, and it's very communicable. And it's devastating to flocks because it spreads rapidly and they die. So what happens is if a scrapie case is identified in the States, they euthanize that animal and then they trace it to see where it's been, what sheep it's been exposed to, and all of those sheep also need to be euthanized. So it's pretty traumatic if you get it, and so they're putting a lot of effort into preventing it. Having said that, it's not common. So I was reading somewhere that since 1947, when it was first identified, only 1,600 sheep have been identified and euthanized with the scrapie. The side note is, how we put the ear tags in our sheep. The reason that's a requirement from the USDA. It's a scrapie tag is what it's called. So if they did identify a sheep in our flock, let's say, that I maybe sold to somebody else, they could trace that number back because there's a database that keeps track of that. So that's why I can't bring a live ram over. Rather, we are able to bring over straws of the reproductive fluids that we can then put into our ewes and accomplish that goal of diversifying our gene pool. Okay, now the second thing about this whole process is there's different ways to inseminate the reproductive material into the ewe. There's one, I'm just going to call it the turkey baster, where you can just put a tube up into the ewe and squirt the sperm into her uterus and let the sperm find the egg and fertilize it and whatnot. So that's an option that's viable for a lot of different types of livestock. Unfortunately, not really optimal for sheep. And I'm going to explain that to you with this very simple drawing that I just did. So this is what a reproductive system of a ewe looks like. And this is the opening to the outside. So when a ewe is bred, typically, the ram will be able to insert the material right through here. This is the cervix. And the ram is designed so that he's actually well suited and can spray the sperm up into the uterus where it can then travel to the ovary and fertilize the egg. The problem with the sheep cervix, this part right here, is that it's a myriad of labyrinth-like folds and tucks, and it looks kind of like macaroni and cheese, which I don't recommend you Google it to look at it because it's whatever. So if you take an instrument, because the organ on the ram is really very custom designed to be able to go in there. And there's actually a lot of moving parts that allow him to spray the sperm up into her uterus, which using an instrument, they just have not figured out a way to do it yet without, causing a lot of distress on the ewe and just having very low rates of success. So there are people that do it. I know a farm that does it, but the rate of impregnation is very low. Somewhere I read like 1 in 20 instance. Right. So for us, we have 8 ewes. So those are terrible odds when you think about, we're depending on this year's breeding to have a big impact on our farm. We spent quite a bit of money, and once those straws are used, you're done. So there's a procedure that you can use. The doctors do it. It's actually they get very highly trained before they can do this process. There's a procedure, and it's called laparoscopic as opposed to the turkey baster method. With the turkey baster method, you would squirt the material up through a tube into her cavity. Now, with laparoscopic, this is a surgery. It's a non-invasive procedure, but it is surgical, where they will actually surgically insert the sperm into this part of her uterus. This is called the horn. So they'll actually inject half of the sperm in one horn and half of the sperm in the other horn. And then, so you're totally bypassing that issue with the cervix. So your rates of fertilization are much higher, right? So then what happens is the sperm will travel down this little passageway here, where here's the egg is actually going to come and they're going to meet somewhere in between, hopefully. Then that egg is going to come down here and affix itself to the uterus and grow into a beautiful lamb. And you're going to do the same thing on the other side. So hopefully the goal is to get two little fertilized eggs in there. And then 147 days later, you're blessed with beautiful lambs. So I did talk about the cost a little bit, right? It's the cost, the monetary cost. So for us doing 8 ewes, it was around, I think it was $200 to purchase the material, and then it was like $250 to transport it. So that's only for 8 ewes. Imagine if we had bred 30, but it was around $450. But more than that, just that opportunity being lost, right? So if you're using a method that's not as reliable, you're wasting that valuable material that took all that effort to select and collect and transport. And so, you want to get a really optimal twins from each ewe is the best outcome. So laparoscopic procedure. So I want to talk about that. I did watch a few videos that other veterinarians have made about the process. And when I went to read the comments, there was really strong reaction, very emotional reaction by people who didn't really understand what was happening because it's uncomfortable. So I was thinking about that, and if you know me at all, on my channel, I really strive to avoid content that's troubling. So I don't video ewes that are sick, and I don't share with you, the violence that happens with sheep. I mean, sometimes, the rams when they're fighting and stuff, I don't share that because I don't find it doesn't really forward the story that I'm trying to tell. And it's just, I don't know. I want to make a space here that's warm and comfortable and, shows you the lovely parts of raising sheep for their wool. I decided against sharing the procedure. I did have my camera there. The vet was very accommodating and said, yep, you can video. So I'm going to share bits of it, but I'm not going to you're not going to see a lot of detail. If you would like to see the detail, if it's something that you need to learn about for whatever reason, I'm going to share some links in the description of the video of a couple that I saw, so you can see exactly. Well, and you know what, that's the other thing too, is like the vet that we used this time was ever so slightly different from the vet we used, whatever, 15 years ago when we did it. And some of the stuff is different on the videos, but it's the same premise. So if you want to see it, but like I said, I've just decided to edit it carefully so you don't see an image that's going to stick with you and bother you if you're that type of person. So I read in some of the comments that people were using words like barbaric and unnecessary, very charged words that bothered me. And so I wanted to share some facts and talk about choices that you make when you're, raising animals, when you're raising livestock. So I read a point of view that said it's actually safer to AI sheep than it is to introduce a ram to a ewe. And their comment was about just the actual interaction. The ram can be very rough, which I don't think I've seen that, but I did have a couple instances where the rams were not gentle with the ewes just in the regular daily activity. And I'm not going to go into detail because it's unpleasant, but needless to say, those rams were never used again. So there is some validity to that. There's also the issue, if you want to weigh the risks and benefits of both methods, with the natural method using live rams and introducing them to the ewes, when you put the rams back together, there's a very violent 2 to 3 hour period of time where they are fighting with each other in order to establish the new hierarchy. So who's the new alpha male in that group of rams? And we've had instances where a ram got killed through that. Again, no details, and I don't video that, but it happened. And so that was unfortunate. Look at me, I'm all... it was a negative outcome from doing natural breeding. So I just want to say, there's a lot of facts, there's a lot of data to consider, and this isn't something that, we would never knowingly subject our sheep to something that we knew would have lasting ill effects to them, And this AI procedure is very common, very routine. But it's upsetting to see it, right? If you're a layperson and you just go into YouTube and see this video, you're going to be alarmed. So then the question is, all right, well then why don't you just use one ram? So then you don't have to deal with that whole reintroduction process. That has its risks as well. So single sheep, a sheep by himself is not going to thrive, particularly a ram. They need companionship. They're a flocking animal, right? So even if you've got a ram with the wether, when you put that ram back in, there's going to be a violent interaction for a couple of hours that could have a very negative outcome. So there's always going to be that risk. So, and that's the other thing with our farm is we always will use at least 3 rams during breeding. So we'll have 3 breeding groups, and that's because we want to get that as much diversity as we possibly can. And we also, you could. We don't like to put one ram with more than 8 ewes because that is a stress on the ram, and it's that time of year. We breed in the fall, and we live in an area the climate is very cold in the winter and harsh. So that ram loses condition during breeding, and then he's got to go through a whole winter season here in Western New York. It's not a good situation for the ram. So, and because we like to usually breed anywhere from 20 to 30 ewes each year, 3 rams is usually what our minimum is. So like anything, there's risks and benefits and choices you have to make. And I saw a graphic. It was a circle. And it was like, this is me. This is my life. This is what you know about me. This little circle on the inside. And it's all about, people jumping to conclusions. They don't really know the whole story. So, all right, so let's talk about the process itself. The first part of actually getting the ewes ready, it's all about manipulating their hormones. And what you want to try and do is you want to try and get them so that they are all at the point of estrus or heat, you know, fertile, at their most fertile, when you take them into the vet to get that sperm inseminated into their horns, their uterine horns, which we learned are those two things at the top. So our sheep, most sheep, get into estrus in the fall. I don't know why that is. And their estrus is only a few days, but it's a cycle of 17 days. So, and I don't know how many times they cycle. Usually, I think it's over like a period of 2 months that they are cycling, they call it. So what we do is we put the ram in with the ewe for 5 weeks, and we cross our fingers and hope that we're catching those ewes, those 8 ewes, at some point in estrus. We're relying on the ram to realize she's in estrus and her to stand still to let him impregnate her. You know, when lambing comes, if you guys have seen my videos, it's usually a 6-week process from the first lamb to the last, just because of all the variability in those ewes cycling, because we don't manipulate their hormones before we breed them when we breed them with rams. We just sort of let nature take its course. So with AI, because there's one event where that semen is introduced into their uterus, you have to have them all in heat at the same time or in estrus. So there's a lot of work we have to do, preliminary work, before the day of the AI in order to get them all in the same, all at estrus at that time of our appointment when they're going to get inseminated. And it was interesting, I was talking to the vet and he said, you know, there's a number of ewes that you hit where you have to do that whole process at on a different schedule, so that, because you can only do, he said it's best to plan on doing 10 ewes at a time in that window of time where they're in heat. It's crazy. So he said if you're going to do more than 10, you're going to need to have 2 schedules of doing that hormone manipulation. 2 sets of sheep doing it at different times. So can you imagine if you wanted to breed 40 ewes? I mean, people had probably worked out the system. But I mean, to me, it seems very overwhelming. So this was actually, we keep this family calendar here, and I'm going to use this to keep track of my story here. So on the 10th, we had the vet come out and inserted the cedars. But I know that what those do is they're the first step in the hormone manipulation to get the ewes progesterone levels high. And progesterone inhibits fertilization, I guess. So you want to get them all to it's like a boot camp, right? You want to get them all at the same level of that hormone, because then that starts the cycle for them to get ready to be fertilized. I'm probably mangling this, and my vet's going to watch this, and I'm appalled. But I wanted to try and make it more layman's terms. All right, so we had the vet come out and do that for us because we haven't done it before by ourselves. I mean, Rich did it 15 years ago, didn't remember how to do it. We had concerns that maybe the technology was different, whatever. So we just said, okay, we're going to have the vet out. So that was on November 10th. The next thing we had to do was on the 21st, had to give them a shot of estrogen, and we had the vet come out for that as well.
This little one is what I need.
Okay.
Should be this one right here. So the estromate is a prostaglandin. Okay, so that's the one we're going to use today. Here, I'll give you your box back.
All right.
For sheep, it's just 1 cc that they get.
1 cc.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what their size is.
Nope, every sheep is the same. They're all going to get just 1 cc.
And what's that do?
So this is the one that's going to help clear their cysts away, and it's going to help bring them into heat.
Okay.
And we have you all set up on a time breeding cycle.
Yes.
So this is I'm not sure, have you done any other shots yet or no?
No,
This is the
This
first
is the first
one.
set, and then we do another set on Wednesday when we pull the cedars, and then
Yep.
Friday is the day.
Okay, perfect. All right, who's the first one?
All right. Whoever goes in there. Come on, let's go.
Sometimes I have to go in the back there and push them in.
Do we need to keep track of who we've done, or are we going to let them go? When
We'll
they're
let them
done?
go.
Okay.
Come on.
I'm so used to working with cows. I love how you just like pick it up and slide it in. So you said I can open this?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. We'll just lift your coat up.
And this is going in the muscle, right?
Yes, so this is going right in the muscle. They have a lot of muscle right in here. We're just going to give it right in the muscle there.
And you're going to actually train Rich, hopefully, so he can do the last two, so that we can do the muscle.
Yeah, so they have a fair amount of muscle right there. You want to stay away from the back of their legs because sometimes they have some, well, they have some nerves and some ligaments that run through there you just wouldn't want to accidentally hit. So
Nothing here though.
nope, right in here is a really good place where there's lots of muscle.
All right.
And I didn't check Cedars yet today. She's not done.
fine.
No,
Yep. She's
oh
all
my
set.
gosh. Okay, and I didn't check Cedar, so can you just do a quick check to make sure it's still in there?
Yep. So you should see the little string.
Yeah, I've been checking it every
Sticking out.
day. I just didn't take the time to do it today.
Do you want to go out the side or out the front or?
Out the front. So that was on the 21st. And this had to happen at a particular time of day, too, by the way. So then on the 23rd, which was the day before Thanksgiving, the vet came out and gave another shot and then pulled the cedars out. And that was the 23rd. So the 24th was Thanksgiving. I am going out right now to round up the ewes that we're going to be doing AI on tomorrow, because they're going to need one. They need one last shot. We're going to give them tonight. 2 days ago, the vet was here to help us with the shots. They had to be administered at 6:30 in the morning, and I mean, there's all sorts of really particular timing things they have to pay attention to. And so he came. He took out the cedars. He said we got good news, I guess, a little with that, in that the cedars were nice and clean. And he said, you know, a lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes the cedars will come out and they'll have a lot of like white blood cell type material on them. And you know, he said that's not ideal because it's possible with that, if that happens, that they're not getting the correct amount of progesterone, that it might be preventing it all from coming off of the cedar and going into their system. So that was encouraging. And both of the vets, you know, complimented the sheep, saying that they looked like they're in really good shape and, you know, looked really nice and stuff. So that felt pretty good. So yeah, so now I'm going to go out, and tonight they have to get a shot. It has to happen at 6 p.m. And then we take them, they got fed this morning. They're not going to get fed tonight, which is going to be rough because they're in there with the rest of the ewes, so they're not going to be able to eat. They can't have water after 9 p.m., so I got to take their water bucket away at 9. And then tomorrow morning at 8:30, we're going to load them up into the trailer, and we're taking them to the vet to do the event at 9:30. And they are okay with me having my camera, so that'll be great. So yeah, that's the update. Hello. You guys ready? They always go outside. So I kick them out when it's time to feed them. Hi, Princess Poop. Guys, you have to wait a little bit. I gotta do some stuff. I'm gonna reset this stuff up here, and when Rich comes out at 6, I'll have this all ready, and the ewes will be in that pen, and the holder carrier thingy chute will be attached to these two side panels. So we'll see what that looks like. And here's the lovely girls. You're gonna have such a big day tomorrow. I'm sorry I can't feed you tonight. I really am sorry. You're gonna have to watch all the other girls eating. It's just terrible. So we broke out the electric buckets because last week when there was a big storm in Buffalo, we didn't get hit with very much snow, but we did get freezing temperatures, and there was ice forming in the buckets. So brought out a couple of the electric buckets, and all the rams are now set up with the electric buckets. We used this system when the vet was here both times. They really liked it. They appreciated that we have it set up. And I added the man door just because I was trying to eliminate going over the gate by myself. We also added this lamp just because, you know, you're giving shots in the muscle and there's wool there. So it's easy for them to be able to see. Once they're done, then they're going to go back over there and I'll feed the rest of the ewes. And I set up the table not because we're going to play cards, but it's just easy to put the shots down somewhere clean rather than dropping them on a dirty floor. So I fed them in the morning. They did not get any feed in the evening. We gave them their last shot, and that was at 6 o'clock p.m., had to be a particular time. And then they were separated into a separate pen, and then the next day at 9:30, we did the insemination. Everybody's loaded. It's going to be about 30 minutes before we get to the vet. I just texted him, so we're 15 minutes early. So making good time. I got a lot of snow down here. This is Attica. It's like a big day. Okay, so the process to actually insert the sperm into their uterus, it's a laparoscopic procedure. And laparoscopic is where you take an instrument, and this is actually a procedure that's very commonly done in humans. And it's a safe, non-invasive method of you stick a probe into the abdomen, and you're able to, there's a little there and a light, and you get a scope you can look through, and you can look at the organs. So it's used in pregnancy sometimes, and just if people want to, if they need to look at, you know, what's going on in the digestive tract and stuff, they can use this procedure. And it's very standard, very well safe relative. I mean, if you had to do this with a real surgery, you know, you've got a lot more tissue being cut, and then you're also, the surgeon's actually got his hands in animal, so this laparoscopic is ideal. With the procedure we used, there was two instruments, so there were two areas of access into the abdomen. One was the scope, so he could see the horns and stuff, and the other was a very long custom syringe for injecting the sperm into those uterine horns that he saw with the scope.
Good.
So the procedure involved, first of all, the sheep got an anesthetic. So we took one ewe off the trailer, and the vet gave her the shot that gave her, just kind of numbed her and brought her down. And they don't put them out 100% because it's a bad, really stressful to put a sheep under all the way, and they can have respiratory problems. The sheep is still slightly awake, but you could totally see they were a little buzzed. So give her the shot, let it kind of sink in, takes like 3 to 5 minutes, it seemed like, based on the pattern. And then we would gently loaded her up onto this surgical table, and then they restrained her feet. They had to tie her feet at the top of the table, which looks really upsetting, but it doesn't hurt her, first of all. And second of all, it's really important because if during the procedure she has some sort of reflexive kicking or whatever, you could hurt her, and she could also hurt the operators, the team that was working on the ewe. So you restrain her top legs, and then what they do is they tilt the table so that she's kind of suspended. And the reason you do this is that you want all the other innards, the non-reproductive organs, to sink down towards her head so that you can safely see and work on the reproductive organs. And so that's the way it looks, and it's very alien to us. It's very unusual.
This is the part of the process where she preps the syringe.
So this is where the straws are stored. We're getting a peregrine.
So she's taking peregrine semen out of that tank. Peregrine is one of the rams that we brought over from the UK, his semen.
So that just heats it up a little.
You have to pause it. Because they're
It's
frozen.
frozen, so it thaws it. Okay.
So it was kind of frantic, and really didn't have a opportunity to ask her how this procedure went. So you can kind of get the visual. She's essentially prepping the syringe with the semen, and then she'll take it over to the vet where he can then inject it into her horn.
Yeah, the horns are pretty big. They're a little bit more pink when you push them with the probe. Yeah. They.
So then, like I said, the vet will then take the scope and the syringe and insert those into her abdomen. And the work is trying to locate the horns, the uterine horns, and then put the syringe into the horn and then inject half of the sperm into the one, and then find the other one and inject the balance of the sperm into the second one. And then once that's done, they're both rapidly removed. And then he sutures them with dissolvable sutures. I think he put 3 in at most. And then he sprayed it with an antiseptic spray. And then he gave them an antibiotic, long-term, like a 5-day antibiotic. And then very gently tilted them back, removed the restraints, and then gently tilted the ewe back and set her on her feet, and we were holding them and supporting them to make sure they had their bearings. And then all of them walked from where the operating station was to a nice little rest area where they were able to lay down and kind of doze off the anesthetic until then they were ready to get up and jumped on the trailer. I don't have footage of them getting on the trailer because my battery died at that point.
Okay, so it's all done. We're heading home. All 8 ewes were bred. We found out that, we talked a little bit about as he did each one, kind of shared what their condition was and their tone and stuff, so that was really interesting. So when we get them home, we're going to put them on a separate wing, put some straw down, and then he said in 5 days, check the suture just to make sure that it's not infected, and if it is, just give them LA200. He also said that if they go off feed or start to temperature, to also give them the antibiotic. And so they'll be in quarantine or isolated just for 1 day, and then he said they should be fine. The sutures are going to dissolve on their own. He did talk about their horns, and he said that they all looked like they were the correct condition. I guess they can be very loose and floppy or very tight and kind of crunchy, which that's an indication that they're in heat and ready to be bred. He said they all looked the correct way. And we can feed them right when we get home. So that's it. We're all done. For this part anyway.
But they all got on the trailer and we drove back home, unloaded them. They were perfectly fine. We are supposed to be watching them for the next, in day 5 after the procedure. He wants us to just check the incision to make sure that it's clean and, not showing any signs of inflammation or anything. And then it's just, wait the 147 days for beautiful, hopefully twin lambs to arrive. So then when we got home, we decided to be fairly overcautious. The vet said they did not need to be separated, but they've been separated for a while, so that stress has kind of been mitigated. And so we just laid down 2 bales of nice, clean, fresh straw in their pen, and put the 8 ewes in there. They were able to eat grain, but it was really because they were still a little feeling the effects of the anesthetic. They were just kind of eating really slow and just moving really slow. Sweet things. But then I gave them some hay and water, and that's where they've been. And it's, you know, it's pretty exciting now that it's over. It's a big relief because, you know, as much as I, you know, characterize it as very routine, it was a challenge to go through it with them, just emotionally, because I have such strong feelings about those girls. So this video is part of a playlist all about our journey through this artificial insemination of our ewes using the UK genetics. So there's a playlist where I talk to the breeders of the sheep over in the UK that we used. I've got a couple other videos of us just working through the process. I have plans to put a video out on the 8 ewes we selected and what it is about them that made us select them. And then I have a couple more interviews of some professionals that were involved in this process that I'm still working to set up. So you know, that playlist is available if you're looking for more information. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and I appreciate you watching it, you know, staying here till the end. You know, check back in 147 days when the lambs arrive. It should be on April 21st, so I'll definitely have footage of that big event.